Good evening. We will call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood Planning Commission. Mr. Medina, could you please call the roll?
And that is informational meeting, Commissioner Kolkmeyer. And that is Commissioner Buckley.
I'm here.
Commissioner Furman.
Here.
Commissioner Grebliunas.
Here.
Commissioner Kolkmeyer.
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Commissioner Overall.
Here.
Commissioner Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 3, Community Resources Art Plan. We have a presentation, so if you want to do it from there or from the podium, either one is fine. It's up to you.
Okay, hello, good evening, commissioners. Thank you so much for allowing us some time on your agenda this evening to present to you. I'm Alexis Moore with the City's Comprehensive Planning Division, and Lane Godsey, Arts Programming Curator with the City's Heritage, Culture, and the Arts Division, or HCA, will be joining me for tonight's presentation. We're really excited to be here. As you recall, we presented this back to you in March as an informational item. And since that time, we've been conducting a great deal more of community outreach and engagement, which Lane will share more about, and have been working with our consultant to draft the Lakewood Public Art Plan. The plan's been posted on the project website for several months for review and feedback, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you tonight and hearing your comments. This is an informational item with the request that the Commission would move this forward at your next meeting for consideration for adoption. The agenda tonight, I'll introduce our project team and share some of the context about public art in Lakewood, and then give an overview of what's been developed as a part of this project. And then I'll turn it over to Lane to talk about the fun details of the public art plan, and I'll wrap up with implementation and next steps and questions. Our internal working group was the core team that worked hand in hand with the consultant and the community throughout this project, and I'm excited to share that we are all 4 here tonight. Lane and I, as well as Michelle Neerling, who is the division manager in the Heritage, Culture, and Arts Division, and Allison Santilli, who's our marketing and promotions supervisor in community resources, and they were instrumental in helping with a lot of the plan creation and review and outreach for the project. We also worked with our consultant, There Squared, who is led by Kendall Peterson, who is here with us tonight as well, and it will be available after the presentation to answer any questions or participate in the discussion, as well as Jill Stillwell. And then we had an internal advisory group that was comprised of staff from a number of different departments within the city, as you can see, and they were really instrumental and kind of a touch point to developing both the plan as well as our internal guidelines and procedures document that I'll talk about in a minute. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on the background of the public art program in Lakewood. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at that in the plan, which includes a thorough summary and the timeline of kind of the history of art in Lakewood. But I do think it's important to share some of the context of the history of public art here as we pause and think to the future with this aspirational and visionary plan. The public art program launched about 30 years ago in Lakewood in the mid-90s because of the advocacy and passion of the Lakewood Arts Council, which is a group that's still very involved in Lakewood. They've got a gallery in the 40 West Arts Hub building on Colfax. This group helped install public art in Lakewood and helped to gain momentum for establishing a more formal public art program. Eventually, the ACIC Public Art Committee made a recommendation to develop a more formal public art initiative, and in 2013, the Planning Department and HCA worked with the community to create the first public art master plan for the City of Lakewood, which was adopted by Planning Commission in 2013 and then approved by City Council as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. I think it's important to note that public art in Lakewood is somewhat unique and initiated and implemented through a multifaceted and very collaborative approach across many departments within the city, as well as a lot of wonderful community partners such as the 40 West Arts District, the Lakewood West Colfax Business Improvement District, and Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District. And without these partners, our public art program wouldn't be nearly as robust and expansive as it currently is. While HCA oversees the permanent collection, which currently numbers about 60 pieces of permanent public art, projects really emanate from a variety of sources as shown here, and artworks range from temporary community-based projects to iconic sculptures that the community in Lakewood knows and loves. The project included the development of 3 documents. The Lakewood Public Art Plan is what we are here tonight to share and discuss, and as I've mentioned, will be recommended as an adopted comprehensive plan amendment to replace the existing 2013 Public Art Master Plan. Additionally, there is an appendix to the plan, which is available on the project website if interested in viewing that, and it includes a benchmarking and analysis of how peer communities surrounding Lakewood fund and staff their public art programs, a summary of all the community engagement that went into developing this plan, an analysis of other, as you are all aware, there's a lot of other city plans and documents that inform public art in Lakewood, and so we took a close look at those to make sure that we were aligned with them for this public art plan. And then finally, a summary of an assessment that was done as part of this project of the city's current public art collection and condition of that collection. The third document is a really important and internally I think probably we're most excited about this essential element that will support the city's public art program to help clarify roles and responsibilities and establish internal administrative guidelines and procedures to support the implementation of the public art plan and program. This document is meant to be nimble and adaptable and won't be officially adopted. It is still being drafted in consultation with the consultant and staff. And when it is completed, it will replace the existing guidelines and procedures document that we created to help implement the 2013 Public Art Master Plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Lane to get into the details on the plan itself.
Thanks, Alexis. And good evening, commissioners. Again, I'm Lane Godsey, the Arts Programming Curator with Heritage Culture and the Arts in the Community Resources Department. And it is my absolute pleasure to be back in front of you again tonight after a number of months to finally present our Connect, Discover, Create public art plan for the city of Lakewood. This is a culmination of 16 months of work to learn from the community about the value of public art and set a really inspiring direction for where we go with this critical public amenity. This visionary plan that we're so proud to say reflects our community's crucial input, builds upon the accomplishments of the previous plan, and charts a course for the future of public art in Lakewood. So the robust public input process involved a series of engagement activities to ensure the community's voice directly influenced the plan. We had close to 1,500 residents and stakeholders who were engaged in the planning process through a variety of methods, including an interactive project website providing background information, quick polls, project timelines, a mapping exercise, a compilation of existing resources, and information about how to get involved. We had community-facing artful engagement projects at Cider Days in October of 2023. We had Earth Day in April of 2024, and ultimately we were present at the Inspire Arts Lakewood events in June of 2024. We had a bilingual survey of community feedback, which proved really important to development of the plan. There were targeted surveys to the mayor and city council, but also our business improvement districts and the 40 West Arts District. Of course, those are critical partners to what we do in public art. There was an interactive mapping poster engagement activity within the Lakewood Cultural Center's Corner Gallery, and that was for the entire month of February of 2024. And then we were also having that same activity simultaneously at the 40 West Arts Hub through the winter months. There were stakeholder interviews and focus group meetings with community organizations and artists, who are, of course, at the core of what we do, and also developers who we'd love to bring into the fold of public art. There were meetings and work sessions with internal advisory groups and also department leaders, too. The planning process revealed that community support is significant for a continued and reinvigorated public art program in Lakewood. In fact, 85% of survey respondents stated that it was very important or somewhat important for their family to experience the arts. Approximately 50% of those surveyed indicated that they would like to see funding for public art increase or significantly increase. Survey results further indicated that the community wants more art, added all around the city in gathering spaces, diverse locations that don't currently have art, or in gateways around the city. And when asked to share a few words about the future of the public art program in Lakewood, the community said this: be different, celebrate diverse identities and artists, and finally, prioritize public art because it's key to making the city attractive to residents, to visitors, and to businesses. Research also demonstrated, however, that Lakewood's public art program currently has no sustainable source of funding for public art or maintenance, and that additional staff resources dedicated to developing and maintaining public art will be critical for the future success of the program. As part of our research, we wanted to understand the current geographic distribution of public art in Lakewood so that we could really identify where the gaps were. And the map that you're looking at there on the left does just that. It'll be one element that we use when considering future public art projects. But we didn't want to stop there. We wanted to learn more about what the community wanted. And so we engaged with this interactive online mapping tool where community members had the opportunity to locate where they would like to see potentially future public art projects. We had more than 100 pins dropped through this online mapping tool, and what you see is the resulting heat map that indicates where the community indicated their interest for public art. Additionally, we had our internal stakeholder group to take a look at the same map and consider it through the lens of development projects and capital improvement projects, but also gateways. And the result is there in purple on that same heat map. So through the research and engagement process, themes about Lakewood's public art program and the vision for its future really emerged. Updates to the program's vision, mission, and guiding principles reflect the aspirations that the community holds for public art. At its core, the vision and the mission remind us that public art really should be woven into the fabric of the community to create a vibrant destination, and one that's activated through sustainable, diverse, and inclusive practices so that we can foster a sense of connection through this type of public art. Ultimately, our key findings are the foundation of the core concepts and the key strategies that I'll launch into next. So, core concept A, we want to create transformative art destinations throughout Lakewood. We know that a desire exists to not only support and maintain Lakewood's existing art destinations, but to also bring art to underserved areas or art deserts within the city so that we can achieve a more equitable distribution of art around Lakewood. Our arts partners are already doing incredible work to activate spaces through placemaking and public art in places like the 40 West Arts District through the Art Line and also the Alameda Corridor. And the city should continue to collaborate with these partners to support these efforts. But additionally, outside of these partner-focused areas, we know that the community is interested in diverse art across the city. We want to achieve this goal through continued support for existing public art hubs while also prioritizing new art in places where the public art is currently limited. Core concept B, unify and guide public art and placemaking initiatives. Currently, public art is being developed by the city and strategic partners within the community. But to infuse a more cohesive and thoughtful public art initiative, we really need to have a unified and cohesive vision for how to approach these projects. The city can generate and support projects internally, as well as provide leadership, guidance, advocacy, and potentially even cost sharing to priority projects by community partners, developers, businesses, and other stakeholders. Our strategies for achieving this goal are twofold: to unify and guide by creating a cohesive strategy driven by the public art program, but also to forge impactful alliances by proactively engaging and expanding strategic partnerships. Core concept C, diversify the public art collection. And this is really important because we know that there's room for diversification in Lakewood's art collection, not only in the locations where public art exists, but also in the varieties and styles and scales and artistic mediums represented in the collection. We want to work with a more diverse group of artists that can expand the overall vision of the collection and create public art that is really reflective of the entirety of the Lakewood community. To accomplish this core concept, that means that we need to look at expanding the variety of represented artwork within the collection and also provide access and opportunity for artists of all types. Core concept D, engage community through public art. Since we know that the public art program is a real source of pride for the residents of Lakewood, it becomes the role of the public art program to continually engage the community in the process of public art, but also to provide educational opportunities about the collection and its artists. Sharing the process and the benefits of building the public art collection will expand the community's awareness and inspire a sense of community ownership that's really important. We're going to work to ensure that there's diverse participation in the Public Art Committee and selection panels. We want to increase community awareness of the public art program by creating more digital resources like interactive maps that folks can use to find their way around public art. We want to continue to share successes with the community and city leadership to build awareness and support for the program. And ultimately, we want to create art that provides accessible interaction beyond just static viewing. This plan also includes really important implementation and staffing recommendations that are critical to the sustained success of the program, and I'm going to turn it over to Alexis and let her run through those implementation tactics. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lane. This final section of the plan, the implementation plan, includes the detailed recommendations for how these core concepts and key strategies that Lane just so beautifully outlined will be implemented, and the timeline in which to do so. If you are familiar with the recommendations in the plan, there are near-term guidelines, which are to be accomplished in the next year or two, to midterm to long-term, which is the lifespan of the plan, approximately over the next 10 years. There are also a number of ongoing strategies as well. I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the key near-term recommendations under each of the implementation plan recommendations. Tactic 1 is to secure sustainable funding for the public art program. With this tremendous support for public art in Lakewood, we recognize the need to secure both consistent and sustainable funding in order to sustain and grow the program and to ensure that this plan can be fully realized. In the near term, this tactic outlines specifically to reestablish dedicated funding for both new public art as well as maintenance of the existing collection, as well as promoting developer-funded public art projects. Tactic 2 is to add dedicated staffing for the public art program. Given the current needs of this program and the vision that the community has and that's outlined in this public art plan for public art in Lakewood, dedicated staff will be critical to the program's success. The plan recommends a dedicated staff position in the near term to support the program, help realize the plan vision, coordinate and support the many partners who help bring public art to Lakewood, and ensure that the collection is well maintained. The third tactic is to develop streamlined and clear internal guidelines and procedures, and I'm excited to say that we are well on our way with this. This document, because of the many ways in which public art comes into Lakewood, it's really essential that we get the process dialed in and clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and processes to ensure a transparent, efficient process that is easy to follow and continues to facilitate the creation of more public art in Lakewood. This tactic contains a number of near-term recommendations. As I've said, some are already in motion and include both updating the internal guidelines and procedures document, as well as developing tear sheets and handouts that we can share with our partners and developers in the community to help streamline the process. The fourth tactic is, of course, to maintain what we have and take care of our existing collection. We know that this is critical. The current collection needs care, and without dedicated staffing and consistent funding, that has been a challenge. A maintenance plan and ongoing assessments of the collection are recommended to support these efforts, and will rely on, of course, the staffing and financial resources being available. And then the final tactic is looking at the many opportunities that we have to work on implementation of the plan with what is already happening in the city of Lakewood. We'll be looking at collaborating with existing planned capital improvement projects, as well as private development and larger scale projects that we know are on the radar, and recommending an ongoing effort to collaborate internally through communication to consider these opportunities for public art in conjunction with other efforts. With that, I will wrap up with the next steps in our process. Obviously, we're here tonight to share this document with you and have a conversation, answer any questions. We're excited that our consultant is here as well to add her expertise to this conversation as needed. We, again, are requesting that we would be able to bring this forward at the November 6th Planning Commission meeting for consideration of adoption of the plan. And if that proceeds as anticipated, we would be going to City Council in December to approve the plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And of course, you're all aware that that comprehensive plan is being updated. We're tracking that process closely as well. And interestingly, so many of the conversations that we're having through that process, as some of you maybe are already on the advisory groups and are hearing, are also really highlighting the importance of public art in the community. So it's really exciting to be able to share out with the advisory groups working on the new comprehensive plan that we are also working on implementing and adopting this new public art plan, which would then be rolled under the new comprehensive plan as well once that's adopted next year. From there, we are excited to continue to jump into implementing this visionary and aspirational plan going forward. So with that, we thank you again so much for your time and your support of this project, and we look forward to any questions that you might have for us.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore, Ms. Godsey. And if you'd prefer to have a seat, you certainly can. I'm sure we are going to have some questions. I know I've got some and some comments as well. Just for the public who may be watching, and as a reminder to all of us why we are here, this is a plan that is a subsidiary plan of the comprehensive plan that must come before the Planning Commission. And this is the opportunity to make comments, suggest changes, figure out what you would be comfortable supporting when this comes back to us on the question of whether we should adopt the plan or not. We adopt the plan by resolution, and that would presumably take place at the November 6th meeting. And with that, I would throw it open to questions from commissioners. Commissioner Peters.
Thank you. Really appreciate the presentation and certainly appreciate seeing the art around Lakewood and looking forward to more. One of the things that I read was that you had initial funding for the art projects, and then when COVID came, you lost the funding, and it looks like you've been getting funding from some outside sources. Can you talk a little bit about how much funding is internal, how much is external, and what the plan is in terms of supporting the ongoing art and the future art as well?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So the funding was a voluntary 1% on capital improvement projects. This was an internal agreement, and during COVID in 2020, that stopped. We actually have worked with external partners to create projects like the underpass in Belmar Park that goes, the pedestrian underpass. We worked with Alameda Connects. We work with 40 West Arts. The Art Line has been able to secure funding through granting processes in partnership with 40 West, and also through opportunities to partner with outside entities separately from the public art plan. So it gets a little conflated, and I'll try and explain a little better. Public art, the program in Lakewood, is a separate but coalescing operation from the framework plan and the 40 West Art Line. So because they partner with outside entities like the 40 West Group, granting opportunities are far more available for the 40 West Art Line than public art more broadly. There have also been Lakewood Redevelopment Authority dollars that have been available in very specific locations, and that tends to overlap with some of the 40 West Art Line areas. And those monies are not available for projects outside of very specific prescribed geographical locations. So currently, we had a reserve of some monies that were held in the HCA account that was available for public art on small scales and for maintenance dollars. It was a small amount of money. It remains a small amount of money, and no new money has come into the City of Lakewood Public Art Program to develop new projects or extend maintenance opportunities into the future. Now, moving forward, what we're really excited about and is a near-term goal is to reestablish that voluntary 1% on capital improvement projects. So even though there was a pause, we see that the public is so invested in public art, and we've seen this through the Imagine Tomorrow plan, we've seen this through the advisory groups for the comprehensive plan and through our own planning with public art, that we really firmly believe that internal partners are also excited about reestablishing this short-term goal of a voluntary 1%. Ultimately, we'd love to see a codified 1% for art, and that's noted in our plan. We benchmarked that against our peer municipal partners, and that's kind of a gold standard for funding in the area.
Yeah, and I'd seen that some of the other municipalities listed had like travel taxes. Have you thought about anything like that, or are you just looking at the 1% on the capital improvement?
Right, I think we would be open to a variety of options. I think that that's yet to be explored with anyone outside of our internal advisory group and community resources. So the options are plentiful. I don't know that there would be an interest. There has not been expressed an interest in some of these other travel tax opportunities, but I think we're open to any source of funding that would provide consistent and sustainable and predictable funding.
Yeah, it seems like the travel, right? Because people come, they see the art, and then, pay into it. It sort of feeds itself a little bit in that it increases that destination and could potentially.
No, I think it's a really creative idea. I mean, cities have gotten really creative with how to fund these projects.
Yeah, and are you able to talk about what kind of the magnitude of funding is that you need to support both the ongoing and the new programs?
No, I'm not. I think we need to do a real assessment of where we were in 2020 and the types of projects that we'd like to implement. We're just not prepared to answer the question yet about how much funding is enough funding. There are changes. I do know that we have deferred maintenance, and that will be a strong priority for getting us caught up, and funding for catching up on deferred maintenance will be important so that we can move forward.
Great, thank
Sorry,
you so
that
much.
was vague.
That's okay. And you probably don't expect to have that before this comes up for approval. That's something that's ongoing and not necessarily part of our consideration for approval.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Thanks for the question. And yes, the answer is no. This plan is intended to be visionary and not set those specific details. And I think that similar to the 40 West Art Line Framework Plan, where we recommended staffing at a decent level to be able to support the goals for that plan, this plan identifies the need for it and some ideas for how that might happen. It, like many of our visionary plans, wouldn't actually come with an officially adopted number of X dollars is what we would like. I think that from my perspective in the planning department, I'm tangentially involved with helping to implement public art, but we really don't have any staff that are dedicated fully to supporting the program. That's a portion of Lean's job, but not, she's got a lot of other responsibilities as well. So I think even just being able to identify having that vision of hiring a staff person eventually to support this program can help. I think we've done a lot with a very little amount. We've been really scrappy in some of the things that Lane mentioned, and funding through grants at the federal level, which, as you know, has so many strings attached, and it makes projects so complicated. So it's not our first choice of where we look to for funding, but it's been one that has been successful in helping to implement public art, especially along the 40 West Art Line project area. But through the urban renewal, the LRA dollars, through and some of that economic development dollars from lodging tax, I believe, as well. So there's been small chunks of money here and there that we've been able to funnel, but without having that really consistent, dedicated, known quantity, whatever that is. And I think the plan itself doesn't specifically list that intentionally. It says at whatever amount, and just make sure that we have something that we know we can lean on to be able to partner with all of these opportunities to bring public art to Lakewood.
Okay, and then my last question, do you know how much the 1% tax, or the 1% on additional voluntary on capital improvement might potentially, I mean, I guess I'm kind of interested in, would it meet the need, or, you know, how much will you rely on other partners, or would you need to look into other funding sources?
Sure. So I think that the answer is yes, I think it would meet the need. Okay. If you look at the history of the program in Lakewood, what we've been able to do with that voluntary 1% was significant. Okay. Would any public art administrator turn down additional monies or opportunities? I don't think so. But I think what we've demonstrated, if you look at the timeline of inclusion of permanent pieces into the collection, the city's been able to really celebrate public art in a significant way. We need to look forward and see how to augment that funding in a more robust way. But I think we've done a really good job with what we had previously, and it's exciting to imagine that it could be more.
Thank you.
Commissioner Overall.
Thank you. This is really impressive. I am looking at it for the first time. I was not here in March, so I'm really blown away, especially by the groundwork and the community engagement research phase that you did to put this together. What would you say is the greatest weakness of the plan? I understand that it's aspirational, that it's future thinking, and that you want it to remain flexible. Would it be the staffing component? Can you actually kind of achieve much, if any, of this without staff?
So thank you for the question. I think it's a really valid one, an important thing to ask ourselves, and we do with regularity. We do have staff who are working on public art. I am one of them. So being part of Heritage Culture and the Arts, the collection lives with us, and it's a portion of my job. Alexis, being in planning, has been the point person for the framework plan and for everything 40 West Art Line, and we collaborate on projects regularly. But additionally, some of the background that unfortunately we didn't share again tonight is that we do have a really robust interdepartmental and interdivisional group of folks who are working to facilitate public art currently. It would be ideal to have a dedicated public arts staff member, because that can facilitate all of these interdepartmental conversations much more easily. However, I think we do a really good job of collaborating across the city. And in the past, we've been able to accomplish public art. Again, it's definitely our strong desire to have a public art staff, because when benchmarking, that's something that we understand makes programs sustainable and successful long-term. So I don't know if it's necessarily a weakness of the plan, since we're calling for it as part of the next steps, but I do think it's an opportunity and a challenge that we have currently that we need to figure out a way to solve.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think, and again, thank you for your question, and I'm glad that that you are excited about the project. And I think that despite the plan, despite not having dedicated staffing right now, the plan can be implemented, just not to the extent that we would hope it would be. I think when you look back at as Lane mentioned, the 2013 plan, we've looked at building upon that, and that plan also had a lot of really aspirational ideas, and many of which we accomplished, some of which we didn't, and we took a look at that and said, what's still relevant for this plan, and incorporated that. Funding was a piece of that, staffing was, developing those guidelines, the procedures. So again, I think we've been able to do a tremendous amount with limited resources. And I think the program has matured to the point that people really value it and respect it. And when you look at, again, what we're hearing through the comprehensive plan process, and one of the draft goals right now is around arts and culture and being this leader in the region. And, we are working toward that, and I think we are in many ways, and I think this plan will help continue to push that further. So I don't know that I would say that there's any necessarily weaknesses. I'm excited about having the maps. We didn't have that in our 2013 plan. I think it's really helpful from a staff perspective to be able to look at those and understand, where those art deserts are, where we have art currently, where people would like to see art in the future, and where some of those opportunities might exist as we're kind of doing our day-to-day planning and other city functions, thinking about public art on the radar as well in conjunction with those projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. I'll agree with Commissioner Peters with what she was saying about the importance of establishing dedicated funding. My question specifically is about dedicated funding for maintenance of our existing art collection. If we had a mandatory 1% of capital improvement projects being spent on art, that's great, but those are capital projects. By definition, they build new stuff, right? If we codify new requirements in our zoning code for developers, that's great, but developers are by definition building new stuff. What are the possible funding strategies to get money to take care of what we already have?
That's such an important question. Thank you. And I think actually one of the most important aspects of this new plan is how we continue to maintain what we have and any new projects. So previously, our 1% program that was voluntary also was able to allocate some of those monies to maintenance. So we imagine that same allocation of dollars for maintenance, new projects, and permanent projects, and temporary projects could remain. So it's not to say that capital improvement projects couldn't include dollars that get funneled into a maintenance reserve or a maintenance pot. But additionally, as we prepare to incorporate new projects into the program, whatever the funding mechanism is, whether it's development projects, working with developers, we're going to budget as part of that project maintenance. So we can understand from looking at peer organizations, municipal partners, the average amount of maintenance dollars needed for any project, and then incorporate that into project budgets. And then monies, wherever they're coming from, would include maintenance dollars that would sustain that piece over the lifetime of the artwork.
Okay. Is it generally true, or maybe it's not? I thought it was generally true that on a capital project, you're generally restrained to spending money like in the area where the capital project is, right? So you can't maybe be choosy about what you're maintaining. If there's some old art there that needs to be cleaned and refurbished, great. But if there's some art that is in real need of maintenance and it's far from any capital improvement projects, what then? Can that 1% fund still pay for it?
Right. I think that's one method of capital improvement projects. And I actually, Kendall, do you have something to add about that? Kendall might be.
Kendall.
Yeah.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, come on up
Expert
and,
who knows how all
Yes.
of these programs operate.
Yeah.
and if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to the commission and provide your comments.
Hi, thank you. I'm
Thank
Kendall
you.
Peterson. Can you hear me? Okay, my company is They're Squared, and I'm a public art specialist, consultant, planner, all the things. But maintenance is always a really hard thing, and it will probably depend on the agreement for the voluntary at first, the voluntary percent, if it's given. Usually it's, so in certain communities, it can be 25% of that 1%. It really depends on what you agree to as a community. So I think in Denver, it was 1% of the 1%, and that was never enough, so they had to ask for supplemental funds. So there's a lot of different ways you can craft a maintenance thing. The main thing with maintenance is that it doesn't have to get spent down year after year. That's the main thing about maintenance. So you'll have to have some way, some mechanism of it rolling over from year to year, so that
Okay.
if you have a catastrophic thing, like, something blows over or something like that, then you have the funds able to do that.
Right. So I guess the key thing to understand is the capital improvement projects can put money into a fund rather than just spend money within the context and like boundaries of a defined project. That's generally how.
Yeah, and that will really depend on what, if you eventually have an ordinance, how you can, some communities will pool the funds, so it'll just be 1% off the top of, before the funds are even dispersed to the different projects, or it'll be in arrears. I think yours was in arrears, so it's after the year, they kind of calculate it. It's a little calculation on all the qualified projects, and then you can either pool it or you can spend it at the site. There's a lot of different ways that you can craft that as a community.
Okay. Many capital improvement projects are funded with state or federal grants. And those grants always come with strings attached. For example, I think with transportation projects, it's fairly routine that there's an 80% federal grant and a 20% local match. Is money spent on, say, art on an off-site location from the project or maintaining art somewhere else in the city where it's needed? Like, is that a valid... But is that typically considered a valid expenditure related to the project at hand by, the grantor of the money from the state or federal level to be broken off like that?
Yeah, it'll be a situation where you all craft that together as a community. So in different communities, they do not have a 1%. They only have a 1% of what the city is funding out of that capital project.
Wow.
So normally, it's not a whole lot on transportation projects. Some places will actually take a 1% regardless, and the city has to make up that funding amount. So if you have a, $30 million, something over CDOT or something like that.
Right.
That, whatever the funding, it doesn't matter where the funding is coming from. The city, though, will fund the 1% out of city coffers. So that,
Gotcha.
So that, again, that'll be what you will decide as a community. And a lot of times, a lot of communities will stipulate that it needs to be adjacent to the site. So if you're doing curb cuts or streetscaping or something like that, it needs to be somewhere along that street or in a park adjacent to that property. A lot of places will pool their funds. So
Okay.
that will be how you can, if you make a case that you can put it in a community that's nearby that is an art desert, that will be what your priority is as a community.
Okay. So it sounds like at the end of the day, it's kind of a policy choice that
Absolutely.
maybe sometimes we can take 1% or a fraction of 1% off of like the actual allocated budget of a capital project. But sometimes it could mean City of Lakewood needs to somehow from some source of funding somewhere, pony up an additional, whatever 1% of a cost of a project is, and put that into an art fund specifically. And so that there's the policy decision that, whatever we're spending on capital improvements, we're going to potentially spend up to 1% more with some other funding source to
Possibly.
maintain and build elsewhere. Yeah, and then I guess the advantage of doing that is that it gives us a lot more flexibility than maybe some of these federal grant rules do. And,
Absolutely.
And 1% even of like a big capital project is still hopefully pretty affordable for the city.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if you wanted to do a gateway project, a lot of your gateways are going to be transportation projects, right? Where you
Sure.
come in from the highway, and those are always really special projects that communities want to do. And they can tend to be, might want to have the scale so you might need to augment it from other sources and that kind of thing. I really do think that being kind of flexible with an ordinance, once you do get an ordinance,
Yeah.
will be to your best advantage, because then you can do whatever you need to be able to augment certain projects and move projects to places that don't have art, that kind of thing, as the city wills it.
Certainly, yeah, I would agree. I think that flexibility is really key to be able to just have the mechanism to do the maintenance when it's needed, where it's needed. And of course, that is of vital importance. It is the job, and I don't know, in some way like the curse of a city, right? If we decide to build something, we are also deciding that we have to maintain it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, amen, as long as anyone wants it to exist. That's a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, this plan is about art, and you can see all the questions are about money. And there's a reason for that, I think, because we see a lot of different plans, and some land use plans are meant to encourage certain types of development or to guide development in a certain direction or whatnot. This one is highly dependent upon money. Without the funding, it makes it very difficult for this plan to be accomplished. So I think that's why you're getting mainly questions on funding. So I just wanted to also tease that out a little bit. When we're talking about the 1% voluntary, what you mean by that is the city is spending capital dollars on a project, right? And the city is voluntarily deciding that the city wants to spend 1% of the total project cost of the city's money on that, regardless of where the source of those funds may be, right? And then we're also talking about opportunities when there's new development, going to the developer and saying, we want to see something as it relates to art from this project and development,
Yes.
right? And then that third, which I think is less clear in this plan, is, what would be the self-sustaining independent funding source that would handle maintenance, that would do just kind of unrelated projects to capital or to development. And that would be especially important in areas that don't currently have the kind of access to art that we'd like to see. So I'm curious if is there a thought on that? What could be, and that gets to this question of potentially a new revenue source. Is that something that you think should be a recommendation of this plan?
We do have a recommendation in the plan, and I think I appreciate that all the questions revolve around funding. It's something that
We'll get to some other things too.
We
but-
talk about a lot, and it's
Right.
important to, you're exactly right, making the success of the program sustainable. So I appreciate the question very much, and I think the answer is that we do recommend as a midterm goal codifying a 1% as a mandatory 1%. And so we have opportunities to tease out other mechanisms for funding, like open space funds that can help supplement some of the public art dollars. We have opportunities to really design a 1% for art program ordinance, or a mandatory 1% that could look like pooling those dollars, as Kendall was speaking to, that would allow for us to cover maintenance across a much broader geographical area of the city, not just necessarily attached to a specific location. I think that we are always looking for ancillary programming funding mechanisms. So that will continue regardless of whatever funding we're able to secure long-term. But I do think we have at least the start of a good call out in this plan to say, hey, we recognize we need to get this going again, but we also know that in the midterm and the coming few years, we need to codify something so that we have a guarantee.
And again, that's, the guarantee you're talking about is 1% of city capital projects. So it would only be where a capital project is being done. Is that, do I understand that right, or?
That is, and if I could just clarify too,
Sure.
on page, I need some reading glasses, I'm getting to be that age, but on page 25, yes. For under tactic 1, as you point out, obviously the funding is a huge piece of this, but I would argue or just add that I don't think it's just that 1%, and as Lane mentioned, that's the midterm recommendation, and for me, the priorities, the first 3 near-term recommendation, one is figuring out in some way to figure out how to have a line item, a dedicated funding source again, because we haven't been able to rely on that since COVID, whatever that number is. The second one, and I think this is almost as important as everything we're talking about on a 1%, is working with our development community, because as you know, and this is why it's kind of tied to the comprehensive plan and land use planning, so our zoning ordinance talks about in the enhanced development menu getting points for providing public art on a project. And I could be wrong, but I don't think we've actually been able to utilize that yet because it's convoluted, it's challenging. Many developers are interested in it, but there's not a good process yet completely formulated internally and externally with those developers and those external stakeholders. Also, the art line design standards and guidelines require public art in some places and recommend public art in other places on the art line. And we are working with a developer currently who doesn't have to provide public art on his project, but wants to, which is really exciting. And they are, I think, excited about the art line vision and the idea. But without having a really simple process that we can help guide them through and facilitate and have this process dialed in with 40 West and with the on-call art selection that we're starting to talk through, recommended in this plan, and being more fine-tuned through the guidelines and procedures, we're kind of spinning our wheels a lot more than we should be. And so for me, that's why I think I mentioned in the presentation, I'm really excited about finalizing those guidelines and procedures so we can help the development community work with us to help realize this vision. And the third recommendation under near term is establishing that maintenance and conservation funding. And as Lane alluded to, through our calls for public art, whether it's a developer doing it or through a city process, to reserve a percentage and a decent percentage of that project allocation of the original budget to be set aside in a fund to help maintain public art going forward. So those are really, I think, important funding recommendations that I just wanted to highlight in addition to that longer term goal of figuring out a codified 1%.
And I'd like to also add that I think Alexis touched on a really critical point about the guidelines and procedures, that we're putting all of these components in place because we know how valuable this asset is to the city. So we're figuring out ways to make the process easier. So we developed the enhanced development menu, and though it's a tool that hasn't been utilized yet, through this planning process, we've been able to work with internal and external partners, including developers, to say what would make it easier for you. So we want to work with our bids, we want to work with developers, we want to have a fully functional, robust, and multifaceted public art program that engages in the community in a variety of ways to accomplish its goals.
One last question about money. The city council just looked at the budget in the first reading. Is there any funding in this next year's budget for public art?
Yes.
And what would that be?
So we don't know yet. It's not adopted yet. We've made a recommendation for dollars to live in the HCA account, the public art account that already exists. We hopeful for $50,000, $35,000. Honestly, I need to go back and look. I can get that answer to you.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, it would have had to have been incorporated into the budget and
Absolutely.
audit recommendation, so.
Right, budget
Right.
dollars were included
Okay.
in the budget proposal. I don't know how those dollars are going to shake out once it's adopted.
Okay.
We can definitely get that
Yeah.
for you guys. And I think there were some budget exception requests made as well
Right.
for one-time funding for public art to support public art with the Colfax Safety Project, as well as a match on a grant that we applied for, federal grant on another Our Town grant for the 40 West Art Line and public art, permanent public art, because we haven't been able to implement any permanent public art on the art line in many years. So fingers crossed, I need to follow up on where those are at with the budget as well, but we can get that to you for sure.
We'll get a cumulative amount that sits
Yeah.
from HCA and planning and give it to you.
Great.
But we asked for it.
Terrific. So the wonderful thing about plans are that they're somewhat squishy. They're aspirational. They say we should try to do this thing. That's also the terrible thing about plans, because then they get disconnected from the implementation. What is exceptionally important to me are the statements in this plan about diversity. And that's diversity on who is involved with art as an artist, as an evaluator, as contractors, in every aspect of this. And as I looked at the implementation schedule at the back, I saw in core concept C, diversify collection key strategies, seek to include and represent diverse artists and themes. And I might have missed it, but I didn't see anything in implementation that really spoke to that. How do you get diverse artists and themes? What's the way to implement that concept?
If you are able to, there's a couple of other recommendations in here, which is to engage the community through art. So there was enhanced, I think that was the one. Basically, there's some recommendations, I can't find them right this second, but diversification of the artistic landscape, so that was on page 22, and empower local talent. So one of the key pieces to getting more diverse artists is engaging them in education about how to apply for public art, about how to, and you in each of the different selection processes, you can talk about diversity. You can talk not just about diversity of the people creating the art, but also making sure that you have diverse types of art, diverse themes, that kind of thing. So that's one thing, is the outreach. And I think, it's not in this plan, but Lane and I have talked a lot about starting artist rosters and things like that to make sure that artists know about the calls for artists and they know how to apply, because some emerging artists and some artists that have not done public art don't know, they get a little intimidated. So that's part of it. But also that diversity in locations, that art desert piece of things, I think is critically important as part of the diversification of locations. So it's about exposing locations, people who live in locations that haven't had art, about exposing other groups to these types of artwork. It's basically your free museum for the city of Lakewood, and making sure that it's in all parts of the Lakewood community is really a key part of what we recommended as well. So, and
Yeah.
you guys can add to that. but-
And I appreciate that, though. Again, typical of plans, there's all this tension, right? We want to spread art out everywhere, and we want to concentrate it at gateways. And we, by definition, because where the dollars are, we're going to put it near new development. But what about the older parts of town? So that is a difficult thing to balance. And I always am, I worry about a plan that seeks to do everything. If there was, a sense that, well, art deserts are the issue, that's a higher priority than gateways, that resonates with me a little bit more. That would be your expert analysis from engagement with the community, that really gives a plan a little more focus. So on that particular issue, this strikes me as a little bit of everything for everybody. and I don't know how realistic that is. But specifically on the issue of diversification of the artist community, I would love to see that fleshed out a little bit more between now and the final plan, if you think it appropriate. And then go ahead.
And one other thing, what Tactic 5 on page 28 is a key piece of what we're talking about too. So this is not the end of, this plan is not the end. This is definitely an aspirational plan. But the yearly, looking at what they do, what money you have, if you have $30,000, and getting together with her Public Art Commission and that group, making sure that they prioritize certain things, and this laundry list, I agree, it is a lot, is going to be a key feature of what they do every year. And this is why the staff is so important as well. So guiding people through a planning, like a mini plan for the year with that $30,000 will be a key piece. So it's sort of like, so what's our priority? Diversity of artists. So how are we going to make this project, and how are we going to do the outreach and that kind of thing? It all takes staff time as well. So that's a key part.
Agreed.
I love the question, and I'd love to speak on it just a little bit in terms of how we accomplish it. So to address your first question about how to diversify the collection, diversify the artists represented in the collection, I think we have some tactics within the plan that speak to that. One of them being 3.4, it's a near-term goal tactic as part of the implementation plan to develop an on-call artist roster. So that's what Kendall was speaking to just a little bit. And it's a really fantastic opportunity for us to make sure that artists are coming to the table through a request for qualifications, and they can have access to potential public art projects so that there's a process. Additionally, staff will be helping to create the Public Art Committee as it expands and regains momentum after this plan is hopefully adopted. And that's an opportunity to say we want to make sure that we have representatives from each ward, but we want to focus that to make sure that every facet of our community is represented on the Public Art Committee, wherein they'll be helping to set some of those priorities or offer opportunities to recommend, but also they'll be working on artist selection processes through approvals. So that's a really fantastic opportunity to make sure we have all facets of our community represented. Additionally, I think that we've demonstrated that we really have a priority for these diversity and inclusivity initiatives, particularly in HCA, our own strategic plans that fall outside of our internal working processes, strategic plans that fall outside of this plan. We focus on DEIA initiatives, and in our artwork across the city, in public art projects and in exhibitions, it's something that's heavily considered. So I think we have the expertise to initiate and start these projects that could work to further diversify the collection that exists already. Additionally, I think that in terms of it being a smattering of let's do it all within this plan, I actually think that what we wanted to do was see 10 years out from the first public art plan, where are we? And where is the community's appetite for public art? And it was the first opportunity 10 years out from our plan when we were able to accomplish many, many of the goals in the very first plan. We were able to say, okay, now let's assess what we got done and where we go from here. So this was the first opportunity to really get community input in a really large and impactful way to determine what some of the priorities were. And Kendall is exactly right that moving forward, we will use the internal advisory group, we'll use staff input, community input to set priorities around some of this kind of broader visionary ideation that's talked about in the plan. Does that help?
It does. I just, I would like to see that fleshed out a little bit more. I think that, again, we work at cross purposes. We say, oh, let's make sure that each ward's parochial art interests are addressed. Well, that's a very small part of diversity. I mean, it's diversity within a pretty homogeneous community, right? Art is like libraries. Right? It's meant to bring ideas from outside in. It's meant to evoke emotion. It's meant to inspire. It's meant to jar people. It's meant to comfort them. It's meant to do so many powerful things. So are we getting, when we're thinking about diverse themes and artists, are we thinking broadly enough? Are we thinking about bringing those notions from outside our community to our community? Or are we looking at pretty spaces? And I do not personally believe that public art is about pretty. It is about art. And that's a powerful thing, and the city has an important role to play in that. So I guess I would like to feel a little bit more like this is a plan that's going to capture the breadth and diversity of the art world. And that's in terms of themes, it's in terms of who the artists are, it's in terms of the mediums. I don't, and I might have missed it, but I didn't see anything in there about performative art. I didn't see anything in there about digital art. There are a lot of mediums out there that it's not exclusively a mural sculpture art plan, right?
No, I totally agree with you. Everything you said resonated with me just so clearly.
Yeah.
I think you're right on target. And we did ask the community about, there were about 15 different types of artwork that was posed to the community, what they would like to see, because ultimately, we want to set direction, but this is their plan too. And there were a number of types of artwork that rose to the top. It's included on page,
I was just flipping, I don't know which page.
One favorite was eco art.
eco art.
Right. Right.
Yeah, environmental art was really important to the community. But we also posed.
And you get into the issues, the groundworks and
Yes.
things like that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Andy Goldsworthy and such.
$30,000 for
Yeah.
Andy Goldsworthy.
Okay, yes, well. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
great direction, thank you.
And the last thing I'll say, and then I see Commissioner Peters has her light on. And again, I might have missed it, but is there consideration of indigenous art in terms of, we often talk about, recognizing, who was here before us. But I think art is one of those venues that can be incredibly educational, evocative, and a real, adds to the fabric of our community.
If I may, yes, absolutely. All of those definitions are going to also be in the policy document that we're creating. So a lot of the definitions of what we consider art is in the policies. So it's not here, and we can, but what we could do is create an appendix that has all this. So just speaking for myself in this plan and the way that we craft our plans, we put DEI and diversity and I mean, we're pushing for diversity in every facet of what art is, as much as we can push it in any community. And we roll it into all of the pieces of the plan. We never create like a specific definition because it feels a little, it's just, like you say, it's hard to define. It's hard to define. So what we could do is put together sort of a way of calling out the ways that we're hoping for diversity, and maybe we could create a little icon or something like that for the places that we see diversity being an important feature of the tactic or the call out or that kind of thing, so that it makes it more clear what in this plan where we're sort of pinpointing that this you need to look at diversity, and you need to look at diverse artists, diverse scale, scope, technology, all of it. I mean, this is absolutely not intended to be sculpture and murals.
Yeah,
That's it.
And I have no doubt about that. I think it's going to be tough enough for us to get people to read the plan. They're never going to read the policies. So to the extent it can be highlighted in the plan, I think that is, that's useful.
Figure out something.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it'll fold up really beautifully under the core concept C, which is to diversify the public art collection, so we can tease out some of those key strategies there.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Peters.
Hi, thanks. You had mentioned something a while back that caught my curiosity, that the enhanced development menu hasn't been used yet. I thought we approved it a while ago. Can you speak to that?
For public art, sorry.
So nobody's chosen
Correct.
the public art yet to
They-
get their points.
Right, and actually I know Caitlin's here for something else, and not to put her on the spot, but am I forgetting, or is that accurate from what you recall?
No, as far as I know, that's accurate. We have one do an open option.
Is your mic on?
I don't think so.
Yeah, if you could go ahead and be at an open mic, and if you would mind, just introduce yourself for the record.
Oh, apologies for that. I'm Caitlin Long. I'm a Senior Sustainability Planner in the city's planning department. And as far as I'm aware, it's correct that we haven't had any projects yet use the public art option that is written into the enhanced development menu. I believe we've had one that did public art through the open option. They couldn't quite meet the standards that were written into the original version, and so they did an open option as an alternative, so that we've had a little bit of art, but nothing that has actually used the menu option as written.
And we have had a few interested parties, but one of the things that we are accomplishing with this plan update is to modify and augment the guidelines and procedures. That's our internal work document that we've mentioned a number of times, and that will create ease of access for developers interested in using the enhanced development menu. So we're hoping that that creates better accessibility for developers so that they know exactly what to do when they're interested in using those points. I think sometimes it can feel really abstract and opaque about how to create public art if you're a developer and you're not versed in the process of selecting an artist, doing a call for artists. That can feel overwhelming. And so we're really excited that this plan will solve some of those issues and make it more accessible for the usage of the EDM.
Right, with your open artists, the on-call artists,
Yeah.
so that they can easily select from that. Okay.
Right, exactly.
Here's another question. I remember we had a rezoning come through here with a gas station, and they had promised to do art. Did they do the art that they
Was it-
promised to do?
Was it a rezoning, or was it the special use permit?
Or was the special use
for the
permit? Sorry.
7-Eleven?
It was, yes, the special use permit.
So they are in the process, and we are working closely with them and 40 West on the public art elements. So that is an exciting, and this is, I think, a perfect example of there are so many different processes that are followed to get public art in Lakewood. So that was a special use permit, which has a, sky's the limit of what you can ask for to approve that, right? And we have, there's going to be an art fence, a couple of wall murals, and then a thermoplastic ground mural. So that is working its way through the process, which is exciting. That's the one at 7-Eleven, the Harlan and Colfax project, if that's the one you're thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
It's been a
I'm-
number of years since that SUP was approved, and it takes years for the development to happen sometimes. So that's why just really getting these things buttoned up for all of the different avenues in which we are talking to the private sector about supporting this plan and vision for public art in Lakewood is so critical. But stay tuned. Hopefully you'll be seeing that within the year.
I'm looking forward to it, and
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that they followed through with what they had presented.
Yeah.
And so I guess that would not qualify under the enhanced development menu because it went
Correct.
through another process. So it
That's
sounds like
correct.
we've had at least two, maybe there's more potentially, even though they didn't technically take that category it's still worked into the process.
Yes, and I can't speak to the details of this, but there are other ways through the zoning ordinance to meet other requirements that aren't being met through public art. And so I think we've seen a number of instances of that happening too. So there are several different touch points through the zoning ordinance that have encouraged public art to come in, just not the enhanced development menu specifically yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks. I'm pleased to hear that update.
Yeah.
Commissioner Overall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really piggybacking off what Commissioner Kolkmeyer was mentioning in terms of why not include here some of the kind of key pieces of policy that you all are thinking about already. I'm sure that this is something you eat, sleep, and breathe, but it strikes me that there's not much of an outreach component to the actual diversification or attempt to diversify the artists that are included and the types of art that's included in this plan. There's, certainly you talk about growing local talent, but how's the like a request for qualifications to me sort of smacks as like a barrier rather than possibly an inclusive measure, in that artists with a certain kind of profile may not get to you. So again, you probably already think about this all day and night, but those concepts in this would really bolster that diversity component to me.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Again, I think that we really wanted to keep this plan because this is a public-facing document. We really wanted to set some high-level goals that would guide the direction of our internal processes in a way that was digestible and set good guidelines for where we go from here. So when we talked about the diversifying of the public art collection in Core Concept C, we wanted to keep it, the intent was to keep it broad enough that we could touch on themes, we could touch on diversifying artists, we could touch on the ways in which diversity is important to a public art plan, and also have the agility within the internal guidelines and procedures, the internal document, to respond to the changes in the art world. So right now, a best practice is a request for qualifications, but what if there's a better way to do it? And we can adjust this internal work document so that we can say, hey, we learned that actually what we thought was going to produce the most diverse roster of artists didn't work this time. And that's important to us. So we want to be able to adjust and pivot in a way that is functional to achieve the higher level goals of the plan.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, Lane, on page 22, under that Core Concept C, the key strategy 1 with diversify Lakewood's artistic landscape, and that first bullet under A is, and you'll see this with the comprehensive plan too, so I just think it might be helpful to point out, referring to other companion documents that are already adopted so that we are being consistent with those. So this talks about following the Imagine Tomorrow plan, which is the Community Resources Master Plan, and the Public Art Plan guiding principles, which are on page 8, with regard to ensuring that inclusion and diversity are a key criteria when selecting artists, permanent artwork for the collection, and or generating temporary art projects. And so I think, to Lane's point, trying to keep it at a high enough level to have that vision documented here, but recognizing that projects are so unique in their context and their budget, and I think we wanted to have more flexibility, making sure that we have the language right at that high level visionary perspective here, but if there's more that needs to be added, which it sounds like there is, we'll have to think through that a little bit while still allowing for, I think, enough flexibility over the 10-year plan period to do what's right at the moment.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think for me, just that kind of outreach component sort of helps overcome the homogeneity of our Lakewood community and the homogeneity of our art-producing Lakewood community. So kind of what Commissioner Kolkmeyer was saying about bringing new stuff in is just something that I would envision, you know, that I imagine you are already thinking about.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
And not to put too fine a point on it, but I absolutely understand the desire to have the flexibility to adapt, but it's also, if it's that general, it's the flexibility to not act. And at the end of 10 years, say, well, we accomplished this very broad statement of diversity because we put, you know, something in each of the 5 wards. Right? So it's got to be a little more focused on the goal of why we diversify, to my mind. Commissioner Griblionis.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this is going back just a little bit to the EDM and the public art option as part of that. And I could be misremembering, but I believe as you spend more money on public art, you get diminishing returns on how much money to points you spend. So maybe in order to make that more attractive, if it becomes a priority to raise funds through that mechanism, maybe look at how the points to funding ratios out, maybe more advantageously to encourage the use of that. And then I guess this is kind of piggyback on the conversation of the diversity of art. I think my question is tied to wondering about how much of this plan is going towards the development of our Lakewood artist community. I guess that's kind of the question. So like in this vision plan, you know, I think we all understand that, you know, 40 West, for example, is driving a lot of our public art initiatives. But also understanding that we're going to have a roster for potential artists to have on staff or at the ready for potential projects. It's just me wondering how much of this plan is not just about creating public art, but creating and developing our public art community or our local artist community.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we keep talking about core concept C, but it's a really critical element of the plan. And if you look at key strategy 2, we talk about empowering local talent. And there are a number, A through F, ways in which we are hoping to be able to do just that, is to work with local artists. I will say we have a strong track record of working with local artists and regional artists. Development of artists in our area is really important to us, which is why it became one of the key strategies under this point. We have a plethora of artists who are right here in our community who are both emerging and established, and we have worked with them for projects that we have installed here in Lakewood, and we've also worked with them to set direction for this plan. So our artist community is really important, and they actually helped to guide the process of this public art plan through focus groups and feedback. So yes, development is really important for our local art community, and we've done that through small projects, temporary projects. We mentioned in here our landmark project, which was a temporary project that was facilitated across parks all around the city of Lakewood. We utilized the artwork of 10 artists. This was during a COVID period. These were temporary works for 6 months. They were paid a stipend, and these were all Lakewood artists or artists who lived or worked in Lakewood. We also work with and partner with community colleges, Arapahoe, Red Rocks Community College. We work with Rocky REMCAD for various projects across all facets of arts in Lakewood. So these are communities that we're really hoping to be able to engage with as we move public art forward and continue to build those relationships. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think that answers it. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. So you started to touch on it already, and I'm just kind of piggybacking off of the homegrown talent in Lakewood. Has there been outreach to, so it sounds like you do partner with the community colleges and REMCAD. Has there been outreach to the high schools by the city, by this organization, by 40 West? I mean, because I think if we're talking about diversity, being an artist is maybe something that seems untouchable and intimidating and not an option, especially in certain socioeconomic conditions. So I think if there's a way to expose folks that are going to our high schools here, because young people have a lot to say and a lot that they're worried about, and it's a really good way to engage folks that are of multi-economic, multi-racial backgrounds, where their parents may not be bringing them to something or, don't know about it, but they know about it.
Yeah.
Is that happening?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. Yes, it is happening. So public art in Lakewood doesn't happen in a silo. And part of the Heritage, Culture, and the Arts Division is programming. And one way that we've been able to access public art that is really focused on engaging populations that wouldn't normally have access to that type of medium or project is through programming. And we hope to be able to continue doing that through the public art program itself. But let me give you an example. So this summer, as part of the Inspire Arts Lakewood Month, we were able to facilitate 2 separate public art projects that paired Ratah Sak, who is an artist who's represented in our permanent collection. He is a graffiti artist, and he's a local artist and a local artist of color. And he was working with groups of teens to produce 2 public art projects. These are temporary. One is temporary and one's a little bit longer term. And you can actually walk out. We could take a field trip and see the birds on the exterior of the Lakewood Cultural Center. They had been in bad disrepair, and Ratah took a group of teens over the summer to repair, repaint, and install these new public art pieces on the exterior of the cultural center. That was really significant because this was a diverse group of teens who wouldn't have otherwise had access to seeing an artist of color and an artist who was working in a medium not necessarily lauded as the finest of arts to create really beautiful public art. Additionally, this same artist, Ratah Sak, worked with us to create a program. Parks was interested in beautifying some backstops and buildings and planters at Lakewood Park. And this park doesn't have a lot of artwork or opportunities, but what it does have is a lot of community engagement. Those are ball fields, and it sees a lot of Lakewood residents. And these teen artists were able to work with Ratah on the site, and over the course of 2 weeks, they created a mural. Their names are signed to it, and these teens had exceptional pride of ownership in what they created. And in fact, in talking with them on the day that they wrapped up the project and were taking pictures and signing their names, several of them mentioned, I want to be a public artist when I grow up, just like Ratah. And I think that's the exact example of what we mean when we say we want to make public art robust in the city. We want it to be diverse, and we want to make it a sustainable and healthy program long-term.
Cool, thank you.
I think that is all we have for you, Ms. Moore, Ms. Godsey, and Ms. Peterson. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think you can tell that this commission is not only appreciative of your work, but strongly supportive of it, and we look forward to seeing the final plan for our consideration in November.
Great, thank you so much for
Thank
all
you.
your questions. Really appreciate it.
Yep,
Thank you.
thank you.
Item 4, is other legislative matters, and this is an unusual one. So the other legislative matters category is the one that we have when City Council asks us to make recommendations. This particular issue having to do with electric vehicle infrastructure is one in which the Planning Department has already put a lot of work into and thought, and there are some processes underway. So we thought it would be most useful to have staff advise us of kind of where we are and then ask questions. There are, I think, in this area, some very big questions. What is unclear to me at this point, and will be up to all of you, is whether or not we'll be making particular recommendations related to this subject matter to city councils, or simply suggesting that what we hear, maybe with modifications, goes forward. But that, I think, is kind of the question before us today. So with that, I'll bring you up and again, and wherever you would prefer to present from is fine.
Sounds great. I will do it up here. Okay. Good evening again, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. I'm Caitlin Long. I'm a Senior Sustainability Planner in the Sustainability, Climate, and Zero Waste Division. And I'm here tonight to discuss the current status of our electric vehicle readiness in Lakewood and some priority topics that have been identified for the upcoming zoning code amendments that we'll be looking at next year. First, I want to share a little bit more about the existing goals, current trends, issues, and opportunities related to electric vehicles. And then I'll explain what steps the city has taken so far in support of EV charging. And then finally, I'll get more into the priorities that we've identified so far to consider with the upcoming zoning code updates. So getting started with the goals, trends, issues, and opportunities. The state of Colorado first adopted an EV plan in 2018, and it was most recently updated in 2023. Some of the key plan goals are shown here on the screen, and they include a statewide goal to have nearly 1 million electric vehicles on the road in Colorado by 2030. From what sources I've seen recently, it appears that the state thinks we are on track to actually meet that goal, which is pretty amazing. Xcel Energy also has a vision to enable infrastructure to allow up to 1 in 5 vehicles within its service area to be electric by 2030. Here in Lakewood, we have goals adopted in the comprehensive plan to plan for future transportation infrastructure needs to ensure transportation equity, improve air quality, reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, and increase fuel efficiency and incorporate alternative fuel vehicles into the city fleet. In the sustainability plan, we include some specific goals and targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, to promote alternative fuel vehicles, reduce petroleum consumption by the city fleet, and to overall have a more sustainable transportation network and infrastructure. So how are those goals playing out on the ground in Lakewood at the moment? Well, we're seeing very rapid growth in EV adoption among drivers in Lakewood. As of last month, EVs accounted for about 3% of all light-duty vehicles on the ground in Lakewood zip codes, and 22% of original registrations for recent model years. So that means that nearly a quarter of vehicle sales in Lakewood are now EVs. We're also seeing growth in the number of public EV chargers that are being installed in Lakewood. We now have 147 level 2 charging ports and 76 DC fast charging ports for a total of 226 within Lakewood zip codes. Despite this rapid growth, we're also aware of some barriers that have come up preventing more widespread adoption of EVs throughout all parts of the community. And some of those equity considerations include income and vehicle affordability, the access to home charging, particularly for people who are renters or who are living in multifamily buildings, And if home charging is not available, then access to convenient charging at workplaces and in public spaces. There are, on the other side of things, a lot of different funding and technical opportunities that are available at multiple different levels of government that we're working hard to take advantage of as much as we can, and also to get the word out about all of these, since many of them are more on the individual level, such as rebates. So what are we doing now to currently support EV adoption in the community? Lakewood first adopted codes requiring EV charging with new parking lots for new development in 2018. And we then added incentives for above code EV charging within the enhanced development menu, which were also expanded with the 2022 Sustainable Development Standard updates that included changes to the enhanced development menu, as well as the adoption of the greenhouse gas mitigation program. The building code also includes the specifications for how to install EV infrastructure, as well as a requirement for new attached single-family garages to be EV capable. This is a snapshot of the existing minimum EV parking requirements in Article 8, which require that 2% of parking spaces have chargers installed, and between 13 and 18% to also be capable of installing a charger in the future, for a total of 15 to 20% of parking spaces that have some form of EV charging infrastructure. And this is a limited list of land uses. It's not universal across the board, but it does capture those that have that were selected by the approximate time that you would spend parked at one of these types of locations. In 2023, the state of Colorado adopted a model electric ready and solar ready code. And the state electrical board has ruled that a certain provision in that code is now applicable as of March 2024. And that is the part that applies to multifamily for the purposes of EV charging, while the remainder of the model code will be adopted the next time that the city has to adopt new building codes. And so the portion that is currently in effect for only multifamily requires 5% of parking spaces have EV chargers installed, and a total combination of installed, ready, and capable spaces is 60% of all of their parking spaces. So it's a pretty aggressive standard that is built into the state model code right now. Earlier this year, the city also worked through Xcel's Partners in Energy program to develop an electric vehicle work plan, and 13 different city divisions and West Metro Fire District participated in developing that work plan. It's intended to be an 18-month rapid implementation plan, so it should be completed around the end of next year. The strategies that are in the plan currently are mostly focused on 24 and 25, but then also include some longer-term strategies for 2026 through 2030. The plan is divided into 3 focus areas, including fleet, public facility charging, and plans, policies, and standards. So these potential code updates that we'll be discussing fall into that last focus area. Within the plans, policies, and standards focus area, there are 4 key strategies. Strategy 1 includes our work to integrate EV goals into the comprehensive plan update that is currently going on. Strategy 3 includes the upcoming zoning code amendments that we'll be exploring. Strategy 4 includes our ongoing education and outreach in the community and with businesses and other partners. And strategy 2 is the only one that has not yet been started. It will follow strategies 1 and 3 once we have some of those more fully done. So next, I do want to get into the identified code update priorities. And before we go straight to those, I do want to back up just a little bit to look at the actual charging equipment that we're talking about, so we're all on the same page with terminology and understanding why some of these items become priorities. And I'm sure you're all familiar with these, but we'll take a look anyways. There are 3 basic EV charger types. A level 1 charger plugs into your typical home outlet, and it's really appropriate only for residential locations. A level 2 charger is a 240 volt outlet typically, so it's similar to a stove or a clothes dryer at home. They can also be hardwired. The equipment is larger, but it can still be wall mounted, or it can be installed on a bollard or a pedestal. The equipment is a little bit larger. Like I said, it does take 4 to 10 hours to fully charge an EV with that type of charging infrastructure, and it's appropriate for residential and commercial locations where people tend to congregate or spend a little bit longer amount of time, such as workplaces. And then DCFCs, DC fast chargers, are the largest equipment. They're tall standalone pedestals that may need to have a transformer someplace nearby, just given the amount of pull that they have from the electrical grid. For comparison of that electrical impact, a new home typically has about a 200 amp electrical service, and each charging port for a DC fast charger is around between 60 and 125. So you can get about 2 ports are equivalent to the same draw as a whole house. And these do charge more quickly, of course, typically 20 minutes to an hour to reach an 80% charge. And they're appropriate for locations where people tend to be in and out more quickly, such as retail or for charging plazas. The charging stations do come in a variety of different types and sizes. So the scale I just wanted to show here, these are all just offerings from ChargePoint, so one single brand, and you can see that the scale and types of chargers that are on the market are going to inform some of these priorities that we've identified for future code updates. The first main topic that we've identified is land use and design. We need to look at what zone districts are most appropriate for charging stations. Should they be lumped with fueling stations? Should they be defined differently? And then there's also differences between those level 2 and the DC fast chargers, and what zone districts are most appropriate for each of those types of uses. If there's supplemental standards that we need to make these more compatible with our specific context, that is something that we'll be looking at as well. For example, amenities for people who are waiting to do a half-hour charge versus filling up your gas tank in 5 minutes. We'll also take a look at if design standards are needed to better accommodate these and make sure that they're safe and aesthetically pleasing in the environment. Design standards could include things like the size, the location on site, lighting, screening, signage, and other aesthetics. And then we'll also be sure to include definitions within the code for any of the EV-related terminology that's needed to keep it clear and distinct from other uses. We'll be exploring the next priority topic is parking standards. And so we'll be exploring the Article 8 standards that I showed on the screen a little bit ago, and considering expanding that to apply to all uses, for example, instead of just the limited list, or doing it more in alignment with the state model code requirements, so we can explore updating what those requirements are. Colorado also adopted a bill in 2023 that defines how EV charging spaces are allowed to be counted for the purposes of minimum parking requirements. So we need to update our Article 8 anyways to accommodate what those definitions or the new specifications are there. And then thinking about ADA accessibility and how to include design recommendations from the U.S. Access Board and other authorities on how to actually design parking spaces that work for both accessibility and for EV charging. The next priority topic is the permitting process for new stations, whether that's something new on an existing site or whether it's a new primary use such as a charging plaza. Currently, fueling stations are special use permits, which brings them to Planning Commission for approval. And that then goes back to the land use topic and how are we considering charging plazas? How are those defined? On existing site, the permit review might seem like it's primarily electrical, but if we're looking at additional design standards or guidelines, then we also need to figure out how to coordinate between planning and public works staff on doing that permit review that includes locations, setbacks, making sure it's not blocking walking paths or accessibility, height, signage, and any other design standards that are applied to charging stations. Right-of-way charging is another priority topic that's identified in the EV work plan. Some questions that go along with that are whether or not to allow right-of-way charging. This is an example of a charging station on street in Boulder, although I'm not sure if this is a public or private street, to be honest. If we do allow for public charge or for charging within the right-of-way, would that be public only, or would we consider allowing private chargers within the right-of-way? What would the maintenance, utility coordination, and traffic or parking restrictions need to look like for those? Given how complex this particular topic is and how much coordination is required with other departments and other entities outside of the city, this is probably not going to be something that's ready for the upcoming zoning updates that we'll be looking at next year, but certainly we'll continue to figure out what we need to do to develop some policy around right-of-way charging going forward. As we're exploring all of these topics, we're making sure to consider equity and disproportionate access, affordability, future-proofing our infrastructure, safety and fire concerns, as well as maintenance long-term. If there are additional considerations for us to keep in mind as we continue working with our consultants to research these best practices and code examples in other jurisdictions, please let us know. That is what we would like to hear from you tonight. And I just have one more quick slide for you to let you know what some next steps are. So we'll be continuing to implement the EV work plan with support from Partners in Energy for our ongoing research into the best practices and other zoning codes on how to implement all of this. We will be bringing these priority topics back in the upcoming zoning code update that's moving forward along with the comprehensive plan update. And for that, my understanding is a consultant is now on board, and we anticipate a draft of the zoning code coming to you all in early 2025. And we can certainly plan to highlight these EV-related amendments during that process. And with that, thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Commissioner Peters.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have a number of questions on the memorandum and then on the work plan. So I'll start with the memorandum, and I may, if there's a lot of other questions, I can pass to somebody else and then come back to it. So I'll let you decide, Chair, after we go through some of these. So you had noted that there's currently around 6,500 EVs on the road in Lakewood. My question is, hybrids are like a partial EV. Do you add any of those up to create a full EV to, make a more accurate count, or do you only count full hybrid or full electrics?
That figure is reported from the Colorado the Colorado Energy Office has a dashboard, and they work with Atlas Policy on this particular thing. It's Evaluate Colorado, I think is the website. And I believe that figure includes only battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So it does include both.
Okay, so it does the hybrids. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And the graph on slide 12 shows the breakdown between the two.
Okay. Excellent. The next question is, I know that it was noted that these are priority topics that have been identified so far for consideration for the upcoming. Do you anticipate more topics before we reach 2025?
I think that's what we're hoping to get from you all. If there are additional priority topics that we haven't identified yet, that would be good for us to know now so that we can start doing the research to incorporate those into the upcoming amendments.
Okay, great. On the standards for design and performance, are you looking at a single vendor, or are you looking at multiple vendors that would conform to those standards?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, by vendors.
So I know that you're looking at vendors to provide the charging stations. Are you thinking that you put a standard in and then bids could come in from, and you might choose different manufacturers that would all meet the same standards? Or are you thinking you would kind of single source it with one manufacturer to keep it uniform?
Sure, I understand what you're saying. I don't think the city is going to be looking at selecting any particular models of charger. It would be more defining, is there a maximum height? Do we not want to see 12-foot tall chargers? Is there an appropriate height for these things? Is there an appropriate footprint that they take up? What do we need to have them do for signage? Are they allowed to have their name plastered all over all sides of the charging kiosk, or do we want it to be limited to a certain square footage? So it will be more universal standards that could apply to any type of charger, and these would be specifically for chargers that come in for permit review with new development or as a standalone charger that's incorporated into an existing development.
Okay. And I had an earlier question on the right-of-way, but I think you explained it in the photo in regard to like parking right-of-way. And that actually is a public street in Boulder.
Good to know.
And the two buildings in the photo are the Rocky Mountain Institute, and they are net zero buildings. I think they may actually go beyond net zero and pull carbon out. They're pretty great buildings. And I've parked and used those chargers in the photo.
Information.
Yeah, okay, so let me move to my other questions. So I saw that you're looking at putting 2 banks of 6 ports, each of level 2 chargers, one in the, I think in the police garage and the other in the Civic Center garage.
I do not have specifics on what our municipal plans are at the moment, but I can get that information to you.
Okay. Okay, yeah, and I guess my question about that was, it stated in the work plan that the purpose was to charge city vehicles as you're looking at increasing your fleet of electric vehicles. But my question was, are they only going to be dedicated for city use, or if a city is not occupying a charger, can myself or somebody from the public charge there?
I can find out and get back to you.
Okay. That sounds good. And yeah, and I guess it'll be more information I had on that it says that as you're in process of putting those level 2 charging ports in the police garage and civic center garage, you're going to take the insights from that you learn from those stations to make informed decisions on which charging stations the city selects to install at its public facilities for public use. And so that's where my question came earlier in regard to, is the city looking at multiple vendors or a single vendor? And my other question was, have you thought about how many, like, are you looking at increasing X amount of stations over a certain number of years, or is it just a generic aspirational goal?
I do not have details on the specifics of the EV work plan. That is being handled just by a couple other people in the city, but I am happy to have them follow up with you and answer your questions.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I have one more, so I was able to get through it pretty quickly. That's good. It was in the work plan, and I know in the resources, they're talking about examples from other communities and pricing surveys, and I was kind of curious about the pricing, and And then it was noted that there were some federally funded EV chargers, minimum standards if they're federally funded. Are we looking at federal funds to support? Is that an option that we're working with?
Is this also in the EV work plan?
Yeah.
Okay. The only part of the EV work plan that I have any familiarity with is the policy and standards section, which is more on the zoning code side of things for
Okay.
code amendments that would apply across the board to new development as well as whatever the city ends up choosing. But I am happy to have people reach out who are more familiar with the other aspects
Okay.
of the EV work plan, since they're doing that more operationally.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your questions.
So appreciate this. I will tell you that I had an overall reaction, which was to be surprised that we are not further along. And let me start with the fleet, because I think the work plan from July said there were 2 Chevy Volts. I see in the picture you have one of those beautiful new Silverados, but are we really talking about in a city of our size that we only have 3 electric vehicles? Is that, and again, this may not be your primary focus, and we'll get to the land use side of it, but if that's the case, that we only have 1, 2, 3, 4 electric vehicles in our fleet, that really surprised me. And I think that you've probably heard a lot from City Council about sustainability, and the notion that our fleet has not made progress is probably an area of incredible priority, I would think. And on that, I see in the work plan that there's a reference to increasing the electrification of the fleet by a, quote, percent. But what is that percent? Is that a 1% increase a year? Is it a 20% increase a year? And so I think it would be useful for us in trying to figure out whether to make particular recommendations about more rapid development of a plan on EVs to the City Council. What are we talking about here? I mean, how many vehicles are there in the fleet? Is it true that we only have 3 electric vehicles? Is it true we only have 2 level 2 chargers that are city chargers? That shocked me. If you'll pardon the pun, because we're talking about EVs, but it really did. I mean, heck, there's 4 at the library. I've charged a lot in the city. I guess, none of those are city installed ones, but that was surprising. So I'm going to get to bigger policy questions, but really want to understand, is there a plan to electrify or change to some other alternative fuel of our fleet, or is there no plan? Because the work plan simply says 8%, but it doesn't say what percent and how many vehicles is that. And so that would be really important to me as it relates to the fleet. And then secondly, are we serious about the city leading on public chargers, or is this going to be, is the intent to simply have it be a private sector development? So I'd be very interested in that. As we turn to the issues on the land use side, what do you think the best view is? Is an electric vehicle charging station, is it a land use? Is it a utility? Is it a part of infrastructure? What is it? Because that informs how we regulate it, how we incentivize it, how we discourage it, how we screen it, all of those things. Is there a view from the department about what an EV charging station is? How should we be thinking about it?
Great questions, and thank you for being so insightful and how deeply you read into the EV work plan. I will have to have some of my colleagues follow up about anything related to the fleet or to the public charging at city facilities. Those are just not the areas that my understanding was we were here to discuss tonight. But I'm happy to pass on the concerns and your questions so that we can make sure to get those answered for you. As it relates to the land use, I think that's kind of one of the big questions that we've been struggling with and why land use has been identified as a high priority topic, because it can be all of those things, I think. It can be a land use, whether it's accessory to a shopping center that we have a charging bank installed. It can be a primary use, similar to a fueling station, similar to a gas station, to have a charging plaza. So those two things would need to be treated a little bit differently, and we need to figure out how to deal with each of those. They are very similar to something like a utility structure, but then it's at the same time, we also want to make sure to promote them and make sure people are aware that they exist and that they're visible, which is not something we typically want to do with your old electric transformer. And so those are definitely the questions that we've been wrestling with, and why we're looking at pursuing these code amendments, and why we've included Partners in Energy to help us with some of the research into best practices and how other cities have handled those questions, because you're right, it's complicated and it's not a one-size-fits-all type of question.
But I think it is important for us to take a direction, because it informs where the zoning ordinance ought to go. Real basic question, what's the best view now on, should these be isolated or should they be ubiquitous?
What do you mean by isolated?
Do we say, put them where people sleep because they got level 2 charging, concentrate them at a fueling station type model, or is it better practice to have them where every time you turn around a corner, there's one right there in the right of way? I have views on this, but I'm curious if there's been some informed research or policy ideas about how we should be thinking about it. Do we want these on every street? Do we want these concentrated so that people seek them out as a destination? What would be the best policy?
I think that what we're seeing from the state level, at least, is that both is the way to go, that we need both for them to be distributed throughout the community, which is why the state model codes include them in all land uses. So whenever we adopt our new building codes next, we will have to include EV charging as part of the parking standards for all new development. Currently, we do for a select list of uses, including a variety of commercial uses, but it will be across the board for any commercial building going forward. So I think it's both distributed, as well as we need to make sure to also have more of the fast charging hubs and plazas available for people who do need to get a quick fill, or if they're considering things like delivery drivers or people who are passing through. It's the last stop on the way up to the mountains, get the last charge in before you head up to wherever you're going for the weekend. And
there's more charging in the mountains, frankly.
There is, that's true, but you got to get there first. And so having both, I think it's a combination of a distributed network as well as a network of the fast charging plazas is what we've been seeing as guidance from the state level.
And what you just mentioned is so important, and we're really going to need help on this. The current approach is to tie EV charging to parking, but parking minimums are being required to be reduced because of state legislation, and there's a lot of good policy evidence to suggest that we ought to be reducing parking minimums. So we're kind of working at cross purposes. If on the one hand we say the reason that these EVs, you have to put them in because you have parking requirements, and we reduce the parking requirements, those two strategies need to work together rather than probably against each other. I have several more, but I see some lights on, so I'm going to go to Commissioner Buckley next.
Thank you. I know you said that you're most familiar with the policies and zoning standards, but so I'm going to ask you my one question first. That's maybe not exactly that. You did mention the importance of access to home charging, especially for those who live in multifamily residential, and the updates with the state model code that are now in effect, and of course our own code requires EV chargers at new multifamily residences, but the vast majority of multifamily residences in Lakewood are old. They've existed for a long time, and they're probably not going to get redeveloped or changed in any significant way a long time. And so since zoning is forward-looking, what other policies and strategies are viable to encourage, the installation of EV charging structure at maybe like older apartments and condos and townhomes and such like that?
That's a great question. I think that's another topic that we'll be exploring within this policies section, aside from code updates. I think that's getting more into the opportunity mapping, the strategy too that I had mentioned that we haven't started yet, identifying where those gaps are and what the barriers are to getting more distributed charging across communities that really need it. And those, like you said, older multifamily buildings we know are going to be a challenge. And that's what the purpose of that other strategy will be, is to help identify some of those, and then what strategies can we try to use to help inform how to better those.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving into like the land use concerns. I think you did mention it briefly on one of the slides, looking at like supplemental standards like lighting, and Chair Kolkmeyer mentioned, visibility. I think one thing I've heard from people who use EV chargers, maybe for, a public charger for, a longer period of time, maybe they're there for half an hour, fast charging their car at night because they don't have access to home charging. There's a perception of like a fear of public safety, right? Just, is the place where I'm charging my car like safe? Is it well lit? Can I see someone coming? Is there enough activity around there where I don't feel like I'm alone in this dark place? And I've definitely sat in the dark place at night, fast charging my car, and it doesn't feel comfortable, so I stopped doing it, frankly. And I think that problem is, it's probably a pretty widespread perception issue. So I think the zoning standards around the site design of that are just really critical.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other question about the design requirement standards. We do have this unfortunate problem, which the feds have been trying to work on, but to not a clear resolution yet, that there are different kinds of plugs for different electric vehicles, right? Tesla famously had their own unique plug, which they've open sourced within the last year and called it the North American Charging Standard. So some other automakers are now tapping into that network, but it's a totally different plug type than most other vehicles use. And so it's going to be true for a while, just with the EVs already on the road, and probably even future model years are still being made out. There's not like a clear consensus yet on which plug should which automaker use. We have, it's a problem, right? With gas pumps, it's the same kind of gas nozzle you put in any gas tank, and they'll all fill up your tank with gas. But there's the Tesla, and there's kind of like the everybody else plug, right? And so you build EV charging stations, yay, but effectively for any one EV driver, divide by 2, right? It's what you can actually use. So is there any thought in the standards for how to deal with that? Are we requiring multiple plugs? Are we, leaning in on federal standards to say, industry, you got to get to this plug. I don't care which one, but just we need to adopt the standard thing. How do we deal with that?
What we currently have written into the enhanced development menu is that for the chargers that they want to claim for points, they do have to be a universal style of charger, so basically cannot be Tesla's proprietary plug for those.
Although that's not proprietary anymore.
Fair enough. It was at the time that the code was written.
Right.
But yes, you're right. And
So
so
it's-
we're monitoring whether or not something gets more federally adopted, in which case that would simplify things a lot. But I think in the meantime, probably continuing to ask for universal charging, whatever that might mean. And then the availability of adapters is fairly prevalent, is my understanding. And so it's, that can hopefully be handled that way.
Yeah.
But if you do have other suggestions on how to manage that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. My suggestion is above your head and mine, right, is that the federal government just needs to say, this is the standard. And everyone with old cars will get adapters to go to that standard, right? But until we get there, because it's complicated, right? They tried. The CCS is the plug that most non-Teslas use for level 3 DC fast charging, and that was intended to be the standard, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when the feds put out those regulations, and then Tesla open sourced theirs, and there's actually so many Teslas on the road that now there's already more of those plugs than the new chosen standard. And so which way is it going to go? There's kind of two plugs that might win the standards war. So until it's mandated or until the market is clearly picking a winner, I might have a preference that, to the extent possible, can we do both, right? Put some of each plugs at each, especially if it's like a larger DC fast charging station, which is a bigger issue. Mandate some of all the kinds of plugs that are in common use in the market to be there, because that way, the driver of whatever individual car you have and whatever plug you have, you don't have to think like, well, is this charger in Lakewood for me or is it not?
Thank you.
All right. I don't think I have anything else.
Commissioner Furman.
So this will seem a little bit like piling on the same sort of concept, which is two things. One, the cross-purposes aspect of how, in reality, the reduction in parking or the push towards more transit are all contrary to our needs for the charging. But I think there's a little bit of, we're all trying to get to the same place. But the other piece that's piling on is this concern about most of, and Commissioner Buckley was talking about the forward-looking aspect of building code and zoning and the older homes, and I don't disagree. I think if the distributed approach is what is desired, then the only way to achieve that, due to the fact that for the most part, there's whole neighborhoods that there's going to be no development, and you're not going to have them actually distributing to those neighborhoods unless you are either leaning heavily into the incentivizing nature of it, right, which is federal, state, they already have their incentives, but even the city leaning into incentives or something, and you'll have to forgive me for how crazy it probably sounds, or something like allowing other businesses to get into the mix of, as you were talking about, for example, having charging in right-of-way. How that works, I don't know, but I think that's the only way you're going to end up with distributed version of this. And I'll be honest, I think even with the incentives, I don't know that you'll get there. So I think you're inevitably in sort of the focused model. I just don't think the other one will work. So at that point, if we're going to talk about implementation in code and zoning, I think that's the place where it is the requirements that get put onto the various zonings for providing certain types of chargers that will make the most sense. Because the communal zoning, obviously there's things the city can do, right, at municipal buildings, or RTD can do at transit locations to help create these sort of compact zones of charging. But I think what we can do with building code and zoning is, I don't know what it exactly looks like, but intensifying the requirements or incentives for businesses and those things that are being built new. Again, that is, this I think is a real cross-purpose issue that will make it harder for things to be built. But if we're forced into the concentrated model, which I think we are, that may be a cross-purpose that we are stuck with, such that you have to have more than we would expect from businesses and city development, charging wise. I guess I don't see a solution that doesn't potentially get in the way of some development, but that may be inevitable.
Commissioner Peters.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Furman's point about encouraging in older commercial buildings. One of the things, and I don't know to what extent you've thought about this, but I mean, with my plug-in hybrid, I don't have to charge a large battery, and I can just plug it into any 120 volt outlet. But the issue when I'm staying in, excuse me, in multifamily buildings is they don't have those outlets available. And so, you know, it's a pretty high cost to put in a charging facility, but there is a lot of grant money and there are a lot of rebates out there to do that and incentivize that. But even just having electric outlets, which is way less expensive, and having those accessible, it might be a lower cost way to help encourage and support that. Because it's been hard for me, especially when I've traveled. And, I bring my charger, I can plug it in anywhere, I have an extension cord, but I'm in a parking garage for a multifamily unit, and there isn't an outlet anywhere. So just wanted to put that out there as a possibility. And Paul has his hand up.
Mr. Rice?
May I?
Sure.
So this conversation, I was waving, and as I sit back there, you can't see me, started with Commissioner Buckley, Commissioner Furman, and Commissioner Peters. So think of retrofits kind of two ways. So in the zoning ordinance, we can address it, and we can look at this. But the zoning, if you go through and read, it applies to new and redevelopment.
Yeah.
So it's not just new, it is existing development that changes. And so our threshold is 20%. If you change something to 20% or more, it could be site disturbance, could be adding additional parking, could be adding additional square footage. So there's a 20% site change. Within the area of that change, it needs to meet standards, i.e. we can require chargers with a 20% change to the site. The other thing is we'll have a site that comes in and the footprint stays the same. They're not doing anything with, so it sounds like we may need to take this to a party that's not at the table tonight. You're remodeling a building. So that could be a point where if you want to add EV chargers or do something that when a building comes in and there's a building remodel and whatever a threshold is, you could, there could be some requirements there, but that's not planning and zoning, that's the permit group, but that could be an incentive. And Caitlin, I would defer to you. I'm not sure what the feds or state is doing at that point in time when you have a building conversion or remodel of some type. But planning and zoning, yes, we do have the opportunity at 20% at this point in time.
And to that point, so if the zoning code said, if you meet that requirement, then a specific requirement might be adaptability of EV charging? That's what.
Yes.
And is 20% the lowest threshold for any renovation requirement, or is there any occasion where just pulling a permit, regardless of the scope, might require you to do something new?
Right. I guess I could use the term an arbitrary number. There's no threshold. And that's the number we work on. If we wanted to make it a little more flexible, we could. We see some 20% changes, and they're hardly noticeable, right? You make that change. We see some other ones, and we're like, they're right at 20%, but that looks a lot more significant to the site than 20%. So it's a good question. The number is not necessarily equivalent across all projects.
Commissioner Furman?
I just want to make sure I'm clear. What you're talking about is a 20% change to the site, like physical square footage, 20% change.
Right. And when you say site, think of everything on the site. So it could be 10% parking change, 10% building change. So it's site. It could be building only, it could be land only, or some combination thereof.
But it's still the building's impact on the site.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So, among the big questions, and the more I think about this, the more I wonder if maybe the commission should be making some recommendations on this, because, what are we saying EV charging is? And I'm uncomfortable treating it as a use unless we're going to have concentrated EV gas stations equivalent, the equivalent of that. If that's the model, if that's what'll come before us, Perhaps. But I am wondering more and more whether it should simply be pervasively allowed. One of the questions, I think maybe there was a comment earlier, maybe it's not appropriate in all districts. I'm struggling to think of a district where EV charging would not be appropriate. Whether it's an industrial district or a single-family residential district, I don't know why there would be a district where EV charging would not be a permissible use, if we call it a use. So that's a big question that I would like to grapple with and think more about. Second big issue for me is timing. This issue of whether or not the right-of-way was something that you suggested maybe we couldn't grapple with in the current zoning rewrite, that might be a year later.
We don't have specific timing on that quite yet, just given the pace at which the comprehensive plan and the zoning code update are moving. I think that piece in particular has a lot of other parts and issues that we would need to coordinate with other staff and outside agencies, utilities, Excel, to figure out what exactly we would be able to do with that. And I'm not positive if that would be ready in time to go along with this zoning code update, and also if it's even most appropriate to be within the zoning code, or whether that's more appropriate for the right-of-way standards, the engineering standards.
Okay. Well, that is an important distinction. If it's to be housed in the zoning code, I think it would be hard to not have it incorporated in our next changes. These issues have been around far too long, I think, for us to say we're at the beginning of analyzing them. To the extent EV charging stations are regulated by the zoning code, it needs, in my view, and perhaps mine alone, it needs to be in this zoning rewrite. It is not something that I think we should put off for farther down the road. Commissioner Buckley.
I just wanted to back up our chairman. I agree that this is a high enough priority issue that it needs to be in the next zoning code rewrite wherever we land. And to the earlier points that have been made about, working at cross purposes, we have state legislation that will be applying to us that makes us have to reduce parking minimums in some locations of the city at a minimum. And this where, currently we require EV charging in our parking lots via the parking minimum standards. I think just as a practical matter, the best way to come to some sort of solution so that those two contradictory trends are not working at cross purposes is to evaluate them collectively together as a whole at the same time, and not, adopt new parking standards as part of the whole zoning code rewrite and then come back 6 or 12 months later and adopt new EV standards. It's going to be too separate, and we're not going to be considering things that are just too linked in my mind. And so, maybe that's a lot more work, and we got to scramble really fast to do it. But I have great confidence in you,
Mr. Rice.
So think about again, we're talking about right-of-way, which is kind of public realm, zoning, which is more private realm. We can write the zoning code to allow all kinds of infrastructure into the right-of-way. That's not the issue, and I think the code could be written that way. What it comes about is there's another entity not sitting here that manages the public right-of-way, and what they're struggling with, and I can empathize with them. There are a lot of utilities in the right-of-way, and now you're adding another utility piece of infrastructure. We can require, through the site development process, that the infrastructure for public chargers be placed in the right-of-way. Who's going to manage it? If you leave it to the individual developing the property, then you've got all these chargers that we could recommend a style, but they could be various chargers, so they're parts and pieces. It's like a street light. You want a standard so that those parts are available. So I don't think we'll have a comprehensive right-of-way strategy with the zoning code, because Public Works, it's not the allowing them, it's all the things that come with it, with the maintenance piece. And so that's where they're at right now. The zoning ordinance, we can allow for them, we could figure out a way to do it. It's the management piece that's going to be lagging behind a little bit as part of that process.
Yeah, and I understand that, but to Commissioner Buckley's point, they don't have to be at cross purposes. If we reduce the parking requirements for major developments, that is a massive savings for the development. And it goes to a lot of our sustainability goals in terms of shifting people away from cars and towards mass transit and walking and biking and those sorts of things. And then if the charging that is available is in the public right-of-way adjacent to the development, and the developer bears some cost in that, there does, and I'm not saying this is a final proposal, but I can see the synchronicity of that. Or the synergy, I guess. Synchronicity or synergy? Synergy. Let's call it synergy of those things coming together. Because what we've heard time and time again on the affordable housing piece is parking, parking, parking. That is so expensive. If we're going to increase affordability, we've got to decrease parking. We're also trying to get this electrification infrastructure in. So seeing those things brought together at a quicker resolution is really important, seems to be a really important thing. And on that very issue, and Commissioner Furman pointed this out, is our policy through the zoning code going to be, we're just switching the kind of fuel. Right? We used to have gas cars, now we're going to have electric cars, or maybe hydrogen cars, or maybe who knows what cars. Is that good planning? I don't think so, personally, because I think that an awful lot of our car culture that has been driven by our zoning code has a lot of adverse societal effects in isolating people, in creating less healthy environments. So I will be very interested in an EV policy that clearly understands that the point here is not to just switch from one fuel to another, and that we fundamentally change how we develop our complete neighborhoods. So I really see it as closely tied to the comp plan and to the zoning rewrite. That may be enough for me for tonight, but does anyone have any further questions? Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it, and we understand the department is undergoing changes and whatnot, but there does seem to be a lot of support in the budget for additional staff and prioritizing sustainability. So that, in my view, is a very, very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you all for your feedback tonight.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So I guess I will just throw out the question for fellow commissioners about what you, having heard this, would like to do next. And we have choices. One, we can just think about it and at our next meeting discuss next steps. A second possibility would be that we say, we're really not equipped to deal with this issue. Let's leave it to staff to make recommendations and bring them back to us. Or third would be similar to what we've done on the other legislative matter requests, where we do kind of dig in and decide if we're going to make particular recommendations to City Council on how the zoning code ought to deal with this issue. Thoughts? Commissioner Furman.
I'm not saying we would necessarily be able to get this information, but I keep going back to my sort of the thought about what you were bringing up with the 20% site change and how prevalent that is. This is going to be I don't know if you can even answer this. Is it possible to easily tell how many locations end up with a 20% site change in any given year? I mean, is that Is that something that, I'm not asking anyone to research that necessarily, but I'm trying to figure out if it's even easy to distinguish?
No, because if you exceed that 20%, you go through the site plan process. So we have a case, and the case doesn't actually then come in and say, this one was more than 20%, so it goes off. If it's less than 20%, it's typically some type of permit, a right-of-way permit, a gradage, drainage, erosion control, a building permit, something like that.
But it does seem like, because you're saying the process will define that it's hit that 20% threshold.
Right.
So the numbers are there then, I guess.
Yeah, what I would have to do, let me see how I'd figure that out.
Well, I guess, and the reason I ask about it is I'm thinking about the penetration of the actual ability to go the distributed route versus centralized, which I think in some ways that impacts how you think about what you do to encourage more EV charging.
Right.
And I think the penetration of the distributed route is really what defines how realistic it is to have that distributed route. But so, but you're saying based on the what it is, we should be able to tell, because there are numbers for those cases.
Well, there's numbers. So what the way the process works is someone comes in and says, I want to, there's a conversation with a planner that's not necessarily documented, right? They come in and they say, I want to make a change to my site. What's the process? And the process is, if you hit this threshold, it's a permit. If you hit this threshold, it's a site plan. So in not documenting that comment, I don't know how to tell which permit and which site plan actually were the 20% change, right? Because they're two separate processes. I can tell you the number of conversations that we have about that is a couple a year, maybe 2 or 3. And so I could go through and I might be able to pull up which ones actually move forward with a site plan, but I couldn't pull the permits, right? Because it was a permit to either add 250 square feet to a building, or they took out a landscape island because they exceeded their landscape threshold and they added a couple of parking spaces. So those, and that would be a paving permit, right? So the permits, I wouldn't be able to figure out.
Well, in some ways that sort of answers it anyway.
It's not significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I just wanted to get a better sense of how likely the distributed route would work.
Whoa, don't everybody talk at once. I guess my sense is that maybe this is something we should all give thought to, and at the next meeting, be prepared to say, this is a direction I think we should take on this particular issue. And again, we have, I think, some clear different directions we can take. We can treat this like we have other ones and dig in ourselves, probably without much assistance from staff, as we've done on our other requests from City Council, and say, these are our recommendations as it relates to the electric vehicle infrastructure. Councilor Ryan, who made this request, was hoping to get some, clear direction on where this is going, and the full council supported him on seeking that. Secondly, we can say we think staff is working on this and that they will present plans to us, which we can evaluate and refer to them. So those are some different tacks we can take. And without objection, I would suggest that we discuss this at our next meeting. So Mr. Medina, I think, would put this issue on the next agenda as other legislative matters, EV infrastructure, I think is what we had. Excellent. Our next item is general business. I have nothing on general business. Mr. Rice, I don't know if you have any scheduling notes for us?
Scheduling notes, everybody is aware the hearing next week on October 16th, so we'll be back for rezoning 8600 West Dakota Avenue. Couple other things. November 6th. Jaime, do we have anything actually calendared for the 6th?
I will look.
Approval of the art plan. It was the art plan approval, I thought I saw.
Oh, right. That's the one. Thank you. I thought so. So the art plan is coming back for hearing on November 6th. And then I'm looking at a couple of items on November 20th. I'll know sometime late next week because that's when the packets are due. But I don't have a confirmed date on November 20th. So if you have a conflict coming up, let me know. And then the next date after that would be December 4th, and I do not have anything calendared for December 4th. So as you get towards the latter part of the year, let me know if you're thinking you may have conflicts, actually, myself or Jaime, and we'll just make a note of that.
Yeah, and I may not be available for November 20th.
Commissioner Peters, were you seeking to be recognized? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just responded.
Oh, Commissioner Peters.
Thank you. Just that I will be traveling on November 20th, so it may be difficult for me to get the data or the bandwidth to participate. I'll be in India on that day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think unless there's anything else under general business.
I do have one more thing.
Please.
So there are some additional steps to run Zoom, as you all may or may not know. So what I've been talking about with Jacinta, who helps us out, is if it's okay with the commission for you guys to give us at least a 1-day notice that you will be on Zoom, just for setting up purposes. Life happens. I know not all the time you guys will be able to provide us with 1 day in advance, but if possible, give us a 1-day notice just so we can get set up before and don't wait last minute to get that set up. So again, if that's okay with the commission.
Seems like a reasonable request. But as a reminder to the commission, you cannot participate virtually in a quasi-judicial matter per city council rule. If there is nothing else, then we will be adjourned at 9:37 p.m. Thank you.